Hello everybody, Nurse Scott here. How are you? Before we get started, I want to just say that last week I had the honor of participating in 2 live streams on the Nurse Liz YouTube channel. In one of them we discussed a medical malpractice case, and in the other one we talked about LGBTQ plus issues in healthcare. And I think we all learned a lot, and it was a lot of fun. Next week, Liz plans to have another one of those, and I'm anxious to participate in that one as well, talking about a more serious topic, abortion and the recent Supreme Court decision. When that video is available, I'll include the link to that one below as well. If you decide to go back to school for your master's in nursing, you'll do a major paper for just about every course you take. And you might find that idea pretty intimidating. In fact, it might even be enough to keep you from taking that next step in your career and getting your MSN. So today I'm going to try to alleviate some of those fears, really fear of the unknown, surrounding term papers. And I'll let you know what writing a real graduate level paper is like. Maybe that'll be enough to convince you that grad school isn't that intimidating after all. Don't get me wrong, grad school is a beast. There's a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of writing. It's not easy, but it's doable. Many, many people with less talent than you or me have done it before. Now, I'm definitely an oddball for many reasons, but one of the ways I'm weird is I really like writing papers. I like exploring a topic and searching for relevant articles and putting them all together in a way that makes sense and then coming up with my own ideas about the topic. And I especially like the wordsmithing, choosing just the right word and phrasing sentences just the way I want them. To me, it's like a sculpture. You chip away at it and perfect it, and then when you're done, you have this nice, neat work of art. I know, I'm weird. Most people think that writing is a chore, and a lot of people consider themselves not good writers. And I think in a lot of cases, that just means you haven't practiced much, or maybe you had some really bad experiences when you've tried before, and you're kind of shying away from trying again. Writing is a skill, and it can be learned. And in college, especially in grad school, there are a lot of resources, a lot of support to help you succeed. And that's true even if English isn't your first language. I have some specific tips for you guys at the end. To be clear in this video, I'm not going to teach you how to write a graduate level paper start to finish, but I want to let you know what some of the requirements usually are for a graduate level paper and give you a few tips. Might even improve your grade a little bit. First, you should know that these kinds of papers are very structured. And that's a good thing because you don't have to work out for yourself what to write about and how to group information in the actual paper. There's pretty much a template to follow in the form of the instructions you get from your instructor. And for better or worse, there are a lot of rules from what topic you write about to how long the paper can be, how many references you need to cite, and of course the many, many rules of APA style. You certainly used APA if you wrote anything for your undergraduate nursing degree. The American Psychological Association, or APA, publishes a comprehensive manual of style, that is, a handbook on how to write formal writing. How to write formal writing. Okay, that makes sense. APA is not the only one, however. There's also MLA, which is the Modern Language Association, and that's primarily used in the humanities, so in English departments, foreign language, speech. There is also the Chicago Manual of Style, or they also call it Turabian, that's the author, and they use that more in history, business, and the fine arts. But in nursing, education, psychology, and the sciences, we use APA. When you turn in a paper, you'll be graded on many things, but included in that is your use of APA format. The good news is the rules pretty much make sense, but you do have to worry about every little period and comma. They all mean something, so you have to really pay attention to detail. But like I said, you have plenty of resources to help you. You have the APA manual itself. You have online APA guides, and most every major university has one. Your university's librarian, or your university's writing center. So what's a graduate level paper like? Well, these papers are like mini master's theses. But don't panic. Emphasis on mini. There's usually one major paper per course, as I mentioned, and they usually want you to write about a current problem related to the subject of the course. They want you to find some research about it and explain how your future role, like a nurse practitioner or nurse manager, impacts or is impacted by the topic. They want you to identify stakeholders, which are the people involved in that particular issue, not just nurses. In fact, they're very much right now into interprofessional collaboration. They want you to explore how nurses will work with other disciplines to achieve a goal. The instructor might assign a minimum or a maximum length, or both. The instructor might assign a minimum number of references. Just so you know, you don't have to start writing a paper like this at the beginning and keep typing till you get to the end. You start with an outline, and in many courses, most courses, the sections of the paper are given to you in the assignment. So all you do is type the section headings and the instructions for each, and then spend a few weeks filling it all in. This is an example of what I'm talking about. This is how you start writing a paper. Easy, right? Well, not really. Writing papers, writing scholarly papers is work. It requires a lot of time and resources, but like I said, there's help out there for you in the form of those APA guides, but also grammar checkers and spell check, text-to-speech websites. I'll explain more about that later. Librarians, writing centers, your family, your friends, and of course your instructor. Here's a warning. You will be disciplined for plagiarism. That is, passing off somebody else's ideas for your own, or simply copying. If you say anything that isn't your own original thought, you must provide a reference for where you got that information. The exception is general knowledge, everyday facts, and even common nursing knowledge. If your offense is serious enough, you should know you could be expelled. You've been warned. What makes graduate level writing different from undergraduate level writing is that you won't be asked just to report the information that you found. You'll be asked to think about it and make comparisons and give your opinion on it and come up with your own new ideas about the topic. In other words, to synthesize knowledge. And creating new knowledge to me sounds exciting, but then again, I'm a little weird, and we've already discussed that. You can try to sound more intelligent in your scholarly writing by using big words. I think actually now they're calling it academic vocabulary. But don't feel pressure to sound smart. You can write a perfectly good paper in everyday English. But it is a good idea to use jargon or a fancy word when it's appropriate. And by that I mean when it fits what you want to say more exactly than some other word. You should always write for a naive audience. Don't assume that readers know what your medical or nursing terms mean. You need to explain those. In this type of writing, precision is very important. You should say exactly what you mean. So if you say, mortality has risen 3%, you need to be sure to include over what period of time has it risen, and if that's a statistic for the US or for the world. Okay, now let's talk about the structure of a graduate level paper and what you'll have to do to write one. First, as I mentioned, use the instructions from your teacher to create an outline for your paper. You type in all of the headings, and you set up your document then with your 1-inch margins all the way around. You double space your text, although I have to admit it's sometimes easier to type it in single space and then change it later. The first thing is the title page. There is a very specific formula that you have to follow for the title page, but your school or your instructor may also have their own rules. So it's easy to learn, just follow the instructions. This is what one looks like. The first section will be the introduction, and it doesn't necessarily need a header that says introduction. It's just the first few paragraphs that start the whole piece of work. You'll describe your topic, usually a clinical problem. You'll want to grab the reader's attention right away, but keep it professional. What I mean is you could open with like a funny story or a little anecdote, but I think it's probably more professional to begin with something like a shocking fact about the issue. So you might say something like, Nearly 60% of first-time mothers in the US say they want to breastfeed their newborns, but research shows that common gaps in knowledge of anatomy keep them from doing so. So that's a shocking fact, 60%, and it kind of makes you wonder, wow, I wonder what that knowledge gap is and where's this going? So it draws the reader in right away. Nothing fancy, you don't have to be a creative writer, you don't have to be able to write a mystery novel, but just be aware of how this is going to be read by someone else and how they're going to react to the way that you say what you want to say. And so the next part then you'll say in detail, still part of the introduction, you'll say in detail what the paper will cover in the paragraphs to follow. And I mean literally say, list the things that you're going to say. So an example would be, this paper describes the newly identified problem of breast location for new first-time mothers and the current research being done. Each of 2 recently released study reports is analyzed and best practices for improving breast location are identified. Finally, a quality improvement project is proposed. You can see I'm going to keep this light and funny. You just wait. The next major section is the literature review, and it will have a header that says literature review or review of the literature or background, something like that. This is where you summarize the current literature on the topic, the current research on the topic. And they usually want you to use articles from the last 5 years and nothing older than that. You're going to want to look for at least one that has a well thought out description of the problem. And you'll look for articles that have some support for the things that you're going to say about the problem or the solution that you're going to propose. And you'll want to look for different viewpoints and approaches to the problem. For papers that you write for a course, you're only going to have to use maybe 3 to 8 at the most articles. That's the difference between a paper for a class and like a master's thesis. In a thesis, you're expected to review all the available research on a topic. So relax, your review isn't required to be exhaustive. So this section may look something like this. Several recently published studies have examined this problem, all with similar results and similar shortcomings. The study by Smith et al., 2018, found that fully 40% of new mothers didn't know where their breasts were, page 45. Their findings were similar to those of a research group at Happy Time Hospital a year later, Jones, 2019. Both groups reported several shortcomings in their research methods, however. The most important of these is thought to be the use of the word boob instead of breast in their surveys. You'll be asked to give your opinion of the research. Yes, your own opinion. Was it well constructed, do you think? Did they isolate their variable? Did they use a representative sample? Was the correct statistical analysis applied? Can the findings be generalized to a larger population? Were their findings reproducible? And what are the gaps in the research? Maybe they've studied A and B, but no one has ever looked at the way A and B, and maybe even C, have interacted to influence the problem. And yes, you'll be expected to know enough about research to have an opinion on the study that you read about. Understanding research is a core competency in an MSN program. And then somewhere you'll have an analysis. So what do you make of the situation given the information that you found? What do you think is going on? And what do you think should be done? The next section is usually called something like recommended practice change. And that asks, what do you think should be done specifically? You might have to describe the basics of a QI project that addresses that particular problem. Your solution should be based on best practices or the solutions that have been shown to be effective in the literature that you just discussed. If you propose that something should be done, what proof do you have that it's going to work? There will be a section where they'll ask you to talk about stakeholders. Again, this is all the people who have skin in the game. Whose work is this going to affect? Typically, you'll mention physicians, pharmacists, respiratory therapists, patients, accounting staff, nurse management, and maybe even government leaders or legislators. There is an emphasis right now on interprofessional collaboration, or whatever your school is calling it now. Nursing programs want to emphasize the importance of including non-nurses in the process and encouraging nurses to interact with people outside nursing circles. And then finally we come to the conclusion. And yes, it has a header that says conclusion. Finally, you'll put it all together. Just like in the introduction, you're going to state what's in the paper. So in this case, it might say something like, this paper has described the problem of breast location in first-time mothers in rural hospitals in the U.S. The relevant research was reviewed and analyzed. The best practices for nurses to assist new mothers find their own breasts were drawn from the research, and a quality improvement plan was described. Finally, the role of community stakeholders and other professionals was discussed. And also, if there's an ask, it goes here. So if you're writing a paper to ask for approval or for funding for a project, hypothetically, then you include it in this last section. So it might read something like this. The sum of $250 is requested to fund this important initiative. The planning team thanks the funding committee in advance for their consideration of this project, whose goal is to improve mother-baby bonding and the nutrition of newborn infants in our community. After you finish writing, be sure to read it over many, many times, looking for errors and better ways of saying what you want to say. If you're over or under the page limit, you need to fix that too. Then ask a family member or a friend to read it through. Now, they may not understand or even care about the subject of the paper, but they should be able to follow what you're saying. Here's a pro tip. Don't tell anybody. Well, tell everybody. One trick I've used is to copy and paste my text into a text-to-speech generator, and I usually just use like Natural Voices, which is online, and it will read the text back to me. So then I sit and I listen without following along on the reading the text, and I have caught so many mistakes this way. One of the most common errors I've made is when I've reworded a sentence and the subject changes and I've forgotten to change the verb to agree with it. At this point, you'll also want to use some tools to check spelling, maybe even grammar if you're unsure, but you should know that those programs are not perfect, so feel free to disregard some of the suggestions that you get. And you must check your APA style. It will be part of your grade. You can talk to a librarian at your school in person or over the phone or online, or use your university's writing center. Ask whoever's helping you to go over your references and maybe even your in-text citations to make sure that they're all formatted properly. Now, as promised, I do have tips for people whose first language is not English. 3 points, really. First, keep it simple. Don't try to write long, complicated sentences. Don't try to use a lot of big words. Just write clearly and make sure you're saying what you want to say. Number 2, look at other scholarly writing, like the articles that you have to find and read for the project. Get an idea of what this type of English looks and feels like. And 3, as you write your paper, and especially after you're done, have a native English speaker read it through and correct any mistakes in spelling or grammar. And that person can also point out places where maybe something is kind of awkward, and they can even suggest ways of saying it more clearly and less awkwardly. If you've been thinking about going back to school and getting a master's in nursing, but the thought of writing papers makes you cringe, I hope this video has helped you to understand what these assignments are really like. Maybe you're still terrified, but maybe you're a little closer to taking the leap. Leave a comment below and let me know how you're feeling about going back to school. If you found this video helpful, give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Just hit subscribe and ring the bell so you'll be notified when new awesome videos are available. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time.